Sea wind slapped my face with the stench of burnt plastic and engine oil, so strong my mask felt useless. I stood on the deck of the Seagull, staring at the massive garbage mass drifting ahead like a diseased continent. "Welcome to the future of the ocean, Aaron," Cole Ramirez said, leaning his elbow on the rail beside me, half joking, half bitter. From a distance, the trash was just a dirty gray smear on blue water, but the closer we came, the more horrifying details emerged. I saw snarled fishing nets, rusted containers, and giant plastic sheets stacked like warped armor plates. Between cracks in the trash, streaks of pitch-black bubbles surfaced and burst into oily rings. Captain Dana Harris stepped onto the deck, her orange life vest bright against the gray sky. 5 minutes to mooring, she called, her voice echoing through the loudspeaker. "Aaron, Maya, prep the drilling gear. Cole, double-check the cables," she ordered crisply. "Copy," I answered, but my eyes stayed glued to the trash island ahead of the bow. I'd spent my career studying plastic pollution and thought I was numb to photos of dead birds and snared turtles. But looking at this mass, big enough to swallow the horizon, I felt like I was facing a colossal sin humanity had chosen to forget. On the far side of the deck, Maya Brooks clipped a mic to her shirt while talking into her handheld camera. "Day 12 at sea," Maya said. "If smell could be filmed, this episode would get banned." She glanced at me, her mouth curling into a tired yet eager to film smile. "Aaron, give me something super scientific but apocalyptic later, okay?" she called. I gave a dry smile behind my mask. "Something like, 'We're standing on the peak of the trash pyramid we built ourselves,'" I said. "Perfect," Maya replied, winking once before turning her camera back toward the island. The ship shuddered gently as the engines throttled down, easing us toward the edge of the trash island. As the bow brushed the trash edge, the familiar sound of waves turned into the clatter of plastic and metal scraping our hull. "More here!" Captain Harris shouted, and several crew members dropped massive steel hooks, driving them deep into the garbage mass. I slung my equipment pack over my shoulder, climbed down the rope ladder, and felt the trash island under my boots for the first time. I'd expected something hard like rock, but the trash surface gave way slightly, softer than I'd hoped. It felt disturbingly like standing on someone's skin, pausing mid-breath beneath me. "Hey, not every day you get to walk on the world's biggest landfill," Theo Miller said, hopping off the ladder and landing hard beside me. I forced a smile, even as my heart beat a little faster. "Watch your footing, Theo," I said. "It's not as solid as it pretends to be." Together with Cole, we hauled a portable drilling rig with folded steel legs deeper onto the trash surface. Maya followed, filming and muttering about how shaky the footage was on this terrible excuse for ground. We set up the drill on a relatively flat patch reinforced with hard plastic sheets and welded metal frames. Cole checked the hoses and generator, then gave me a thumbs up. "Ready to drill into the heart of the plastic beast," he said, half joking, half serious. I placed my hand on the drill lever, took a deep breath, and reminded myself this was just another sample run. When Cole started the machine, the bit began to spin, vibrating under my feet and breaking plastic with a crackle like snapping bones. The bit chewed through bottles, bags, bits of metal, and animal bones, all mashed into a thick garbage slurry. The stench rising from the drill hole was worse than anything on the deck, as if we'd uncapped a rotting memory of the entire ocean. Then, beneath the machinery, I began to hear something faint and low, a steady rhythm rising from far below. It sounded like a heartbeat, and the thought sent a chill up my spine. "Do you hear that?" I asked softly, but the drill noise swallowed my words. The drill suddenly sagged, as if passing into something soft and springy, then jammed. The motor screamed in protest, and the load gauge needle jumped straight into the red. "Shut it down!" I yelled, and Cole slammed his hand onto the switch, killing the machine's scream. In that brief silence, the entire trash island beneath us shuddered, like a gigantic body flinching in pain. The seagull slammed into the trash edge, metal shrieking behind me. I pitched forward, almost sliding off the rig platform until Theo grabbed my sleeve and yanked me back. I turned my head toward the edge where the sea churned violently against the trash. Between the drifting bags and nets, I caught a glimpse of something round, wet, with brownish-red streaks radiating from it. It looked like a gigantic eye, coated in a film of plastic, its lid slowly closing and opening. I blinked, and when I looked again, there was only murky water and floating trash, as if nothing had been there. "There's something down there," I whispered, though I wasn't sure I believed my own eyes.
Hear this?
Beneath my boots, the trash island rose and fell in a subtle rhythm, like someone far below was taking a long, slow breath in. For the first time in my life, I had a clear, cold feeling that what we were standing on wasn't dead at all, just waking up. Night fell faster than I expected, as if the sky itself wanted to cover up the trash island we were standing on. The seagull's lights flickered on in thin yellow bands, illuminating one small corner of the massive garbage mass. On the makeshift drilling platform, we rigged a small tarp shelter to shield us and the equipment from the wind. Captain Harris decided we'd rest for a few hours and resume drilling in the morning, if everything was still in one piece. "Nobody wanders out there alone after midnight, clear?" Her voice crackled through the radio. I sat at the edge of the tarp, pulled off my gloves, and stared at the lumpy trash surface in my flashlight beam. Beneath the plastic and nets, I could still feel that faint rise and fall, like a breath being held. Cole sat across from me, back against a rig support, opened his water bottle, and mimed clinking it against my thermos. "Congrats on the biggest scientific discovery of your life," he said. "An island that breathes." I grimaced.
What else
I'd
is
be
new?
happier if it only knew how to float. Outside, Maya kept pacing, shooting night footage of the black heap floating on the sea. The seagull's lights made the plastic sheets gleam like the scales of some curled-up animal. As the wind died, the sea grew unnervingly calm, no longer slapping against the hull. I realized the quieter it got, the easier it was to hear that heartbeat in my head. I told myself it was just my own pulse, exhausted after a long day. Theo had crawled into his sleeping bag, but I could see him tossing and turning restlessly. "If the ground under my back would stop breathing, I'd sleep better," he muttered. I didn't answer. I just pulled my jacket tighter as sea wind carried cold and chemical fumes across my skin. My wristwatch blinked close to midnight, and most of the crew lights on the ship had gone out. Maya finally retreated to the tarp, pulling off her headphones and complaining about dead backup batteries. "You should sleep," I told her. "You'll need a brain tomorrow to cut your apocalypse episode." Maya gave a dry laugh. "If this thing sprouts teeth, we won't need editing. We'll just live stream."
You always have it ready, don't
After
you?
they slipped into uneasy sleep one by one,
Of course, you
I
never know
stayed
what you'll
awake,
find out here.
listening to the generators murmur and that
Just doing a
heartbeat
little
blending
live stream.
together. That was when I realized the sea itself was almost silent. Only the trash beneath us was still, moving. From somewhere near the bow, I heard a faint cable squeal, like someone slowly tugging on a giant rope underwater. I reached for the radio to call Captain Harris, but her sleepy voice crackled through first. "Rig team, status check every 2 hours,"
Copy that.
she said.
Over.
"I just heard something pulling on the bow lines." Theo shot up from his sleeping bag, hair a mess, rubbing his eyes. "I'll go check the lines."
Barely, but it sounds
"I'll go
like a
with him,"
distress
I
signal.
said, but Cole caught my arm. "One person's enough," Cole murmured. "You stay and watch. The generator." I nodded, though deep down I felt something slipping out of my control.
We both
Theo
do.
clipped a safety line around his waist, switched on his headlamp, and stepped onto the dark trash
Are you with
field
me?
leading toward the ship. From afar, his headlamp
Yes.
flickered between the heaps like a lost firefly. "Line 1's tighter than usual," Theo's voice came through the radio, shaking slightly in the cold wind. I heard a long metal squeal, then Theo's sniff. Feels like something's pulling from below. Don't stand too close to the edge, I said into the radio, my heart suddenly thudding harder. Yes, Mom, Theo
Now over
chuckled.
to Erin. What have
Then
you got
his
for us?
footsteps shifted direction deeper among the trash mounds. A few minutes later, his voice came back, lower and slower. Erin,
Cole,
you should see this. Cole and I both looked up, tracking Theo's wavering light near the bow. There's a big crack here, Theo said, like a mouth sewn shut. In the trash.
we
I
found
heard him
something.
kneel, plastic
found
crackling under his knees. Underneath,
It's everywhere.
it's not all trash, Theo whispered. I see something like flesh, and these vein-looking strands. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and that heartbeat in my head doubled in volume. Before I could answer, the ground beneath me and the surrounding trash heaved again, far more violently than before. I toppled sideways, Maya shot up, and Cole grabbed a rig pole to keep from being thrown. From the Seagull, a short alarm horn blared, instantly drowned out by screeching metal. The trash mass rose, no longer like an island, but like the back of some enormous creature trying to lift itself. Containers, tires, and plastic slabs slid off both sides like scales shedding, crashing into the black water. Through the falling debris, I glimpsed streaks of slick gray skin bulging under thin plastic armor. A deep roar, not entirely sound, more like a vibration, shook through my chest and scrambled my heartbeat. Theo shouted something, but the radio signal broke into static, his ragged breathing cutting through. I rushed out of the tarp, trying to spot Theo's headlamp, and saw the trash surface there splitting into a massive chasm. The Seagull was shoved several meters away, the mooring lines stretched so tight they hummed like strings before snapping free of the trash anchors.
Can you
A
hear me?
gigantic tentacle, made of cable, fishing nets, and plastic bags wrapped around a gray core of muscle, rose from the chasm like an arm groping for a hold. The tentacle slammed onto the trash, flinging heaps of waste into the air, and for a split second I saw Theo hurled backward toward it. "Theo!" I screamed, lunging toward him, but the trash slid under my boots like collapsing dry sand. The tentacle wrapped around Theo's waist in one coil and yanked him off the edge, dragging him into the pitch-black chasm. His headlamp was the last thing I saw, a trembling streak of light snuffed out beneath the shuddering trash. I slid to the edge, my hand clawing at a slime-slick plastic slab, but below there was only darkness and boiling water. Another tremor rippled through the garbage, then the colossal creature slowly settled, half its bulk still raised above the sea like a newborn island. On the Seagull, I glimpsed Captain Harris shouting something through a bullhorn while Maya was flung deep into a trash forest on the starboard side. Cole and I were stranded on the rig, surrounded by sliding trash, while beneath us the monster breathed long, heavy breaths that made the whole island rise and fall. Amid the chaos, I noticed smaller tentacles groping around the anchor posts, tasting each cable as if learning to control their new body. It wasn't just awake, it was exploring, experimenting, and we were nothing but tiny, meaningless specks on its back. When I looked down at my trembling hand, slick with slime and plastic dust, I knew this night was only the beginning. Dawn did not arrive with sunlight, but with a thick gray haze crawling over the sea around us. I woke coughing, my throat raw as if I had inhaled a factory chimney. Beside me, Cole slept sitting up against a rig pillar, his jacket crusted with plastic dust and salt stains. When I looked up, the stars were gone, replaced by a heavy gray ceiling and the faint outline of the Seagull in the distance. The creature beneath us had calmed, but each of its breaths still made the trash surface rise and fall very slowly. The radio on my harness crackled alive with Captain Harris's voice, muffled as if the fog were swallowing half her words. "Erin, report," she said. "We're maintaining a safe distance but not risking coming back in." I swallowed and answered that we had lost Theo, lost sight of Maya, and the rig was still perched on this thing's back.
We've lost contact with the
The
other
line
teams.
was silent for several beats, just the ship's engines rumbling, before the captain said she would circle and keep watch. "If my people are still up there, you find them," she added, her voice dropping.
Find the coordinates.
I answered copy, but all I could see in my mind was Theo's light disappearing into the chasm. Cole stood, stretching until his joints popped, then looked around at the island, drowned in fog, like a forest devoured by plastic. "First things first, we find Maya," he said quietly. She went down toward the container field on starboard.
That's where we'll
I
find our
nodded,
next target.
grateful he didn't mention Theo, because I wasn't ready to hear his name. We quickly gathered a few essential tools, tied safety lines around our waists, and anchored them to the rig frame as a temporary base. With every step away from the rig, I felt like I was leaving solid ground all over again. The trash forest unfolded before us, plastic columns, tires, and metal beams jammed together like twisted tree trunks. Fog clung to every surface, making everything slick as if it had just been hauled from the sea floor. Whenever we stepped over a crack, I glimpsed black, veins beneath, pulsing faintly with each breath. In some places, the trash didn't fully touch down but hovered over a layer of gray, slimy tissue, like the creature's skin trapped in a suit of garbage armor. "This isn't trash that just drifted together," I murmured. "It's grown into itself." Cole shook his head,
What
eyes
is this?
fixed on bundles of cable clinging to the flesh like metal roots. The deeper we went, the less like the sea it smelled, and the more it reeked of harsh chemicals and a hidden rot. I saw familiar corporate logos on scraps of plastic, half eaten away by salt and time. Amid the chaos, drag marks and deeper footprints appeared, leading off to the right.
They've been through here.
"Maya," I
Jonathan, here.
said,
Yeah.
and my
first
heart sped up because we finally had a direction to follow. We called her name, my voice scattering in the fog among the upright plastic pillars like dead trees. Finally, a weak answer drifted back, half coughing and half cursing. We found Maya pinned under an old refrigerator door, bruised but wide-eyed
Is
and
anyone
awake.
out there?
Cole and I lifted the heavy metal sheet together,
Maya!
our arms shaking as the island kept breathing underfoot. When Maya sat up, she winced in pain, but immediately reached to check the camera strapped to her chest. "Thought I'd lost all the footage," she whispered, then finally noticed the worry in my eyes. "You being alive is enough footage," I said, feeling a little lighter,
You okay,
even
Maya?
though my whole body
Yeah,
was
just,
still strung tight.
trying to
Maya
catch my
glanced
breath.
around, then pointed deeper into the trash forest where the fog was thicker. "There's a chemical container yard over there," she said. "I saw a big corporate logo and some nasty stuff leaking." Hearing the word leaking, I suddenly understood why the chemical smell was stronger in that direction.
There is someone here.
We helped Maya to her feet, tied another line around her waist, and the three of us headed toward the container yard. The farther we walked, the higher the trash stacked, forming canyon walls of waste on both sides. After a while, the walls opened into a wide space where actual shipping containers were stacked in rows. Many of the containers were crooked and tilted, some dented as if a giant hand had squeezed them. On a large white container, the green logo of a chemical conglomerate stood out with obnoxious clarity. Below the logo, faded warning text read, "For oceanic test zones only, do not reroute." One side of the container was ripped open, revealing dozens of metal drums inside, some with their lids broken. From those open mouths, dark liquid trickled down, seeping through the trash and vanishing into the gray tissue beneath. "This is what it feeds on," I said, hearing both disgust and professional curiosity in my own voice. Maya turned her camera on, the lens trembling slightly as she panned from the logo down to the chemicals dripping onto flesh. We climbed into the container,
still contained
standing on the
for now.
cold, wet metal floor under which black veins ran in every direction. In one corner, a waterproof case had popped open, and inside, plastic-wrapped folders were still dry. I tore off the plastic, flipped through the first pages, and saw the title, Poly
What is
R9
this?
Degradation Project, Oceanic Test Zone 7. According to the report, they had injected a catalyst into these waters to teach microorganisms to eat plastic faster. In later pages, the text mentioned unexpected hyper-response in large marine organisms
Cellular
and
components work
integration of
together to
polymer
maintain
structures into
homeostasis.
living tissue. I felt as if someone had whispered in my ear that the monster beneath us was an unwanted product nobody dared acknowledge. Maya turned to me, eyes shining even though her face was pale. If we live through this, this is gold. If we live through this, Cole emphasized,
hide it any
pointing at the
longer.
floor where the black veins converged more thickly beneath this container. The creature's heartbeat seemed louder here, rhythmic and focused, like something paying attention to this exact spot. The container floor trembled, then tilted slightly, making a few drums scrape and slide toward us. At the same time, through gaps at the doorway, I saw trash drifting sideways as if a strong current were sucking it from below. I ran to the container's edge, grabbed the steel frame, and looked down, feeling cold air rising from a deep, black void. Beneath the trash being drawn away, a huge circle emerged, rimmed with teeth made of hard plastic and rusted metal. I realized it wasn't a crack at all, but a gigantic mouth slowly opening, and we were standing right above it. The gigantic mouth beneath us took its first inhale like a sudden headwind, dragging trash and air down into the pit. The pull was so strong my jacket plastered to my body, and my hair flipped back as if someone yanked it. "Get back inside!" I yelled, reaching out to drag Maya away from the container's edge. Cole grabbed my safety line and jerked me back just as the floor tilted sharply toward the mouth. Several drums near the doorway lost balance and rolled out with a thunderous clatter like giant marbles. I caught one drum's lid bursting mid-air, dark fluid arcing out and splashing onto the plastic and metal teeth. As the chemicals hit, those teeth twitched like real muscle, some of the plastic drooping and fusing into sticky lumps. The creature let out a deep roar that was clearly pain this time, not a yawn. The suction stopped abruptly and turned into a blazing exhale that made the container floor drum beneath our feet. I dropped to my knees, my palms numb from the impact as outside trash flew up and rained back down. When I looked up, I saw the ring of teeth closing, then being covered by sliding trash as if it had never existed. "It knows we're here," I said, my voice still shaking and dry in my throat. Cole slammed the warped container door shut as if that thin steel could block a house-sized mouth. "We need to get off this spot," he said. "If this is its mouth, it's going to try opening it again." I nodded hard and stuffed the report into my pack like I was stealing a piece of truth back from its stomach. We crawled low, heading toward the back of the container to find another way out, away from the freshly closed mouth. When we squeezed out through a rear gap, I took a deep breath even though the air still stank of chemicals and rot. The trash around the container looked like a fresh scar now, skewed and torn aside to reveal twitching patches of gray flesh. "It's hunting along the chemical plume," I said, remembering the report's lines about hyper-response. Maya panted, leaning against the container wall, but she still didn't switch off her camera. "If it follows chemicals," Cole said, "then what drew it to the mooring lines and the ship earlier?" That question made me think of the radio glitching as it surged up and the drill load spiking red right before the island shook. "It might be hearing electronic noise too," I said, "or sensing
We have to get out of
electromagnetic
here.
fields
It's not
like
safe."
some mutated giant shark." Cole looked at the radio on my shoulder as if it were a baited hook. "Try a short ping," he suggested, "but be ready to run." I tapped the transmit button, sent a quick
Are you
call
ready,
to
Cole?
Captain Harris, then let go immediately. For the first 2 seconds, nothing happened except the captain's faint reply drifting through the fog. Then, the island under my feet jolted once. That deep heartbeat thumped harder, and somewhere far off, a cable squealed tight. Maya pointed her camera toward the noise, and in the fog I saw the faint outline of a tentacle winding around a floating mooring line. "It can hear us," I whispered, feeling like I'd just rung a dinner bell for a hungry beast. We shut the radio off and stood perfectly still until the trash's breathing settled back to its slow rhythm. "Chemicals and noise," I said. "Those are the two things it chases." Maya looked up at the fog, then at my document-stuffed backpack, like she was weighing survival against the truth. "If we just run," she said, "no one will believe this happened, and it'll drift somewhere else." Cole cut in. "If we die here, nobody will see anything at all." The heartbeat under my
There
feet
is no
thumped
other way
heavily
for us to
again,
move forward.
as if reminding us it didn't care about our ethical debate. I understood that if this thing ever
Just tell
reached
me
a
how we
shore,
fix this, then.
it would turn every coastal dump
Why should I?
into food and armor. "We don't just have to survive," I said slowly. "We have to keep it away from land." Cole frowned. "And how, Professor? Annoy it to death?" I looked toward the fallen drums, remembering its teeth twitching
our
when the
only
chemicals
chance.
hit. "It hurts when the chemicals get inside," I said. "It's not completely immune to the trash we made." Maya raised an
We
eyebrow.
need to contain this.
"You want to make it drink more?"
Once we have this
"Not
data,
just drink,"
we can
I replied.
cross-reference it with the atmospheric
"Swallow a
readings from
bomb
last
right into
month
its gills.
to identify
From
any
its
anomalous
back earlier,
patterns.
I remembered long
If you do not
slits
give us
along
the
the garbage
coordinates,
mass,
the whole thing
spewing
goes into the
black
water.
foam like blowholes. "If those are gills," I said, "we can pack chemicals into one slit and ignite them from a distance." Cole grimaced. "Assuming we reach it without getting bitten in half." "We've seen it respond to the radio," I
So,
said.
if we disable
"That
their
means we
comms
can
here,
lure it to
creates
the
a
right
diversion."
spot." Maya shook her head and gave a dry laugh. "Perfect
this is gonna
monster
work.
trap powered by FM. If we do this right," I said, "we don't just live. We'll have enough for courts, for the press, for the whole world." Cole sighed, then finally nodded. "All right, Professor. Step one is getting off this bite zone and back to the
We'll
rig."
move forward together.
We turned our backs on the container
And a nice
and followed our safety lines home, moving through the trash forest
I'm
now
in.
uncomfortably quiet. Every crackle of plastic under my boots made me flinch,
Good.
as if I were stepping on someone's bones. Closer to the rig, the familiar murmur of the generator rose up like the only landmark of reality. Over the radio, Captain Harris's voice came again, now mixed with waves hitting the bow. "We've got eyes on you, but we're not coming any closer." I looked up and saw the Seagull as just a blur on the edge of the fog, like a toy ship left on the water. "Stay at that distance," I told the radio. "It's attracted to noise and metal lines. Don't give it more bait." As we climbed back onto the rig, the trash beneath pulsed again,
higher ground
as if
and
the
secure
monster were rolling over, readying for its next hunt. I looked starboard where Maya had seen the black foam vents and mentally marked that as the likeliest gill area. We had chemicals, noise, a target, its gills,
The path is
and
clear
very
and
little
direct.
time before it drifted toward busier shipping lanes. Standing on the rig with chemical smell still on my hands, I understood that killing it was also our only chance to tell the world what we had made. We started preparing to kill a creature bigger than a small city with a few chemical drums and a cheap flare gun. Cole hauled the intact drums up from the container yard and lined them along the rig like bombs without fuses. Each drum carried faded hazard symbols, but the stench seeping from the seams said clearly this wasn't meant for human contact. Maya filmed each drum, reading the names of the chemicals like she was reciting an indictment for an entire industry. "If this stuff was used to teach bacteria to eat plastic," I said, "now it'll teach something else.
It's a real shame we couldn't
How to
recycle
die.
more.
Cole grimaced. "As long as it doesn't teach us to go with it." We picked the most flammable
Just another day
drums
in
based on
paradise.
faded warning lines and chemical terms I knew too well. I sketched a quick diagram on the floor, reconfirming the position of the black foam vents Maya had seen on the starboard side. "We have to drag these drums to the edge of its back, right above one gill slit," I said, "where the trash layer
We're gonna
thins
put
out."
the
From up here,
base,
the
and then the
seagull
skin.
was just a blur in the distance,
then it just
a
follows
helpless
from there.
witness to what we were about to do. I briefed Captain Harris on the plan over the radio, trying to glide past the bomb in the gills part, with the calmest voice I could
This
manage.
is Erin. Do you copy?
She was quiet for a moment and then said, "As long as you're alive to testify, I'll stand with you in any court." The promise sounded half like comfort, half like a will. We tied ropes around each drum, ran them through makeshift pulleys Cole rigged on the frame, and began hauling them toward the edge. The trash surface beyond looked like a cliff dropping into a viscous black sea where toxic bubbles still rose steadily. Cole, Maya, and I had to pull while sliding stiff plastic sheets under the drums to make a temporary track. Every time the creature breathed, our track tilted, making the drums slide a few inches on their own. At the edge, the island's skin was so thin I could see streams of black foam bubbling up through the trash, like breath leaking from a gill. "Here," Maya said, pointing at a long crack that continuously spat black foam like a fresh wound. The crack ran parallel to the island's edge, curving slightly, like a mouth lazily stitched shut. I decided we'd place 3 main chemical drums directly above the center of the gill where the foam was strongest. Cole drove a few metal stakes into the trash, using them as anchors to keep the drums from rolling too soon. "If it inhales too hard, at least the ropes will hold the drums long enough for you to shoot," he said. I looked at the red flare gun in my hand and found it absurdly small against a creature that covered the horizon. Maya stood a few steps away, quietly filming the entire setup, as if to make sure that if we died, the world would at least see what we tried to do. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "When I turn the radio on, it'll come closer. We stand our ground and don't get swept off." Cole clipped an extra carabiner from my harness to a nearby stake, pinning me to the monster's back. "If you get thrown, at least you'll dangle instead of falling into its mouth," he said. I switched the radio back on, set it to an open channel, and let it hiss steadily like an invisible beacon. The seagull responded with a short burst of commands, then shut down most of its transmitters so it wouldn't compete for the creature's attention.
Just stick to the
For a
plan.
few seconds, there was only the radio hiss and the wind sliding over trash mounds like low hills. Then the heartbeat below shifted, faster, stronger, like a massive engine switching to overdrive. The island tilted slightly toward us, and from far starboard came the sound of water splitting
We have to get
as something
inside.
enormous slid
Through
our
those
way.
vents.
Maya
Get the
swung her
drums
camera,
out.
catching the distant trash field rising like the edge of another continent. Near us, the gill slit spat black foam harder, the trash crust cracking wider to reveal gray tissue twitching
We are all safe,
underneath.
I hope.
"It's here," Cole said. But I didn't need him to. My whole body felt its arrival like a massive wave of seasickness. The sea beneath us heaved, and a portion of the
systems,
creature's
shut them
body
down.
broke the surface, dragging old cables and debris like whiskers. The movement rattled the chemical drums, some lurching toward the edge and held only by their ropes. I raised the flare gun, my body stiffening as hot, rank air blew from the gill that had opened a little wider. But before I could fire, a thinner tentacle shot up from a nearby trash seam and swept sideways like a whip. The strike knocked Maya flat, nearly flinging her off the edge if her safety line hadn't snapped her back mid-air. I grabbed Maya's line and hauled her back up while Cole threw his weight against the drums to keep them from rolling over. The monster inhaled again, the gill yawning wider, black foam rising like beer froth as a powerful suction dragged air inward. This was the moment we'd waited for, when it opened wide enough to swallow anything we shoved in. "Now!" I shouted, and Cole loosened part of the lines, letting the drums roll down our makeshift track toward the gill. One drum skidded off course and wedged in rubble, but the other 2 plunged into the black foam stream and vanished inside. The suction pulled Cole's body forward, forcing me to grab his line to hold him back, feeling caught between the strength of an ocean. "Shoot, Erin!" Maya rasped, lying prone but lifting her head. I aimed at the dark gap where the drums had vanished, but my hands shook so much the barrel quivered with my heartbeat. Still bracing the ropes, Cole leaned in and offered his shoulder as a rest for my arm, trying to steady the gun. I squeezed the trigger. The first shot streaked out but missed the gill, burning uselessly along the trash edge. "Again!" Maya shouted, and in her eyes I saw not just fear, but a blind hope that this time it would hit. I loaded the last flare, took a breath full of chemicals and dead ocean, and aimed straight at the center of the black foam. This time, when I pulled the trigger, the red streak shot true, disappearing exactly where the drums had gone.
Hold on.
For a brief moment, nothing happened but the wind and my own mad heartbeat in my ears.
Just a little further.
Then deep inside, a pale green light flared, as if someone had lit a chemical fire in the monster's lungs. The explosion wasn't deafening like I'd expected. It was more a choked roar followed by a wave of heat slamming into the trash above. The creature screamed, its whole body arching, lifting us as if we were riding the crest of a mountain wave. The rig split in places, steel beams screeching as pieces fell straight into the boiling sea below. My safety line snapped me back as a section of floor vanished, leaving me dangling over open air, staring down at the water turning into a swirling black-green smear. The monster began to sink, not like a fish diving, but like an entire island being dragged under, taking trash, cables, and rig fragments with it. Cole, Maya, and I curled together on the remaining steel frame, 3 insects clinging to a plank in a flood. As the creature sank deeper, the trash layers were dragged down with it, making the surrounding sea bubble like a giant pot of dirty water. Gradually the pull weakened, the screaming faded, leaving only a resonance in my bones and the reek of burnt plastic in the air. We hung there on the surviving frame, staring down at the black smear spinning slower, and for a heartbeat, I dared to think we had actually killed it. I don't know how long I hung from that steel frame, only the harness biting my waist and the stench of burnt plastic above me. When Cole hauled me and Maya back up, the 3 of us collapsed on the frame, gasping like we'd sprinted a marathon on the back of hell. Below us, the black whirlpool slowed and thinned, revealing dirty gray water with scattered floating trash. For a moment, the sea just looked like any other plastic-choked zone I'd studied, and that was what made me shiver. The radio on my shoulder shrieked, Captain Harris's voice crashing in from another world. "Rig team, respond. Are you alive?" I let out a short laugh that sounded more like a cough, then said at least 3 of us were still hanging on. The seagull eased closer, this time keeping a careful berth from the slowly spinning black stain where the monster had gone under. A rescue boat dropped, carrying 2 deckhands with ropes and a medic with an oversized kit. They lifted us onto the boat one by one, and when my feet finally touched something that wasn't a living back, my brain started believing I was actually alive. On the Seagull's deck, the medic checked our pupils, took pulses, wrapped cuts, and draped a crinkling foil blanket over me. Peering over the blanket's edge, I saw Captain Harris at the rail, eyes locked on the suspiciously calm patch of ocean. When she looked back at me, her eyes held not just relief but the question, "Is it really dead?" "We burned its lungs," I croaked, "but I don't know how many lungs something like that has." The captain gave a short nod, then signaled the first mate to steer us away from the black stain, out of this cursed test zone. Beneath the hull, I felt one last faint tremor, like the dying exhale of something sliding into oblivion. I wanted to call that the end, but science had taught me that any comforting conclusion was usually a dangerous assumption. A few hours later, once the cold shock had worn off, I sat in the control room with Captain Harris and Cole, staring at the sonar. On the screen, the area we'd left showed up as a dark hole, no longer filled by a massive obstruction. But around that hole, smaller blips began to appear, moving slowly like a pack of young sharks around a whale carcass. "Interference?" Cole asked, but the sonar tech just shook his head, tweaking the sensitivity. I remembered the poly R9 files talking about large organism populations and networks, and those 3 words dropped into my gut like lead. "It wasn't the only one," I said softly. "It was a node in a whole trash-eating network."
Look at the void. There should be
Captain
something
Harris
there.
exhaled hard, glaring at the screen as if she could crush each blip with her eyes. "These companies raised a flock," she said, "and only hired us to clean up one mess." Maya appeared in the doorway, bandage on her forehead, hugging her camera like life support, and asked, "What's sonar showing?" I pointed at the small blips clustering together, the leftover ghosts of poly R9. Maya silently lifted her
We're
camera,
not alone down
recording
there.
the sonar like it was the most important evidence she'd ever captured. As the Seagull left the test zone, we fired up the satellite link and sent copies of the poly R9 files and footage to multiple addresses at once.
We have to fight back.
The emails went to environmental agencies, a few journalists, an independent lab, and a lawyer. Captain Harris said she trusted when it's time to fight. I knew it still wasn't enough to beat a conglomerate, but at least it would be harder to erase everything. In the mess hall, some crewmen watched us like we'd come back from a ghost story whose ending they didn't want to hear. Cole just gave a dry chuckle and wolfed down 2 portions, like a man done worrying about whether he'd see another meal. Across from me, Maya drank water while scrolling her clips, screen glow painting the bandage on her forehead blue. I pulled the damp files from my pack and spread them on the table, the smell of moldy paper and smeared ink mixing with food and engine odors. In the appendix, I found a map of oceanic test zones, numbered 1 through 9, each tied to a different current system. Zone 7 was exactly where we'd been. The others dotted the Pacific, Indian, and Atlantic like incubating infections. "This wasn't an accident," I said, tapping each box. "It was a global experiment let off the leash." Captain Harris sat beside us, set down her coffee, stared at the map for a while, and asked, "How many more of those things are there?" I didn't answer, because on sonar, a tech had just called in, "New contacts aft, Captain." We hurried back to the control room where the screen now showed not just the cluster around Zone 7, but faint groups near the edge of our range. "Could be whales," someone offered, but none of us believed that explanation after what we'd just seen. Cole folded his arms, watching the blips drift along the main current like an invisible convoy. "A swarm," I said, the word leaving my mouth as softly as a breath and heavy as a sentence. Maya turned, her voice hoarse but clear.
I don't think that's possible.
"Then we show the whole world before they get near any coastline." I thought of Theo, of his eyes before he was dragged under, and silently promised not to let his death dissolve into edited reports.
Damon.
As night fell again, and the mum. Seagull cleared Zone 7. The big radar plotter still showed red dots scattered like a rash on the planet's skin. Captain Harris laid her hand over the corporate logo in the corner and said, "We're not just seeing trash anymore, we're seeing consequences." I knew that once we hit land, someone would try to slap the word accident on what happened, the way they always did with disasters. But this time we had images, data, audio, and a chemical trail running straight from the poly R9 files to the ocean floor. On deck alone, I watched scattered trash drift by and thought of other seas, other zones, where more monsterbacks might be sleeping. This time, at least, I knew they weren't natural. They were the products of decisions with signatures, budgets, and specific names. The sea wind rattled my foil blanket, cold but clarifying, reminding me this story wouldn't end at port. It would just change stages. Somewhere beneath the black waves beyond our sonar's reach, I could almost hear that deep heartbeat again, not one, but many, layered together. And I understood that from now on, my job wasn't to measure how polluted the ocean was, but to tell people how the ocean was answering.